water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished.
Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. And if you couldn't put it together by the intro sequence that I just had, today we're talking about the Monk of the Way of the Four Elements. You're essentially have the opportunity to be Aang from Avatar, if that's what you want. So, let's dive into how this Way of the Four Elements work, and how come it's so cool. And of course, like every other thing, I want to know your thoughts on this subclass, so let me know in the comments below. Monks who follow the Way of the Four Elements are able to use their ki to manipulate the elements around them, the elements being earth, fire, wind, and water. But not heart, because that was lame and was made up by Captain Planet. While some monks will actually just focus in on one of the elements, others will also take the time and diversify their portfolio by being manipulative of all the elements. And thematically, much like Avatar, The Last Airbender, some of these monks will opt to get tattoos showing their connection to the different elements, whether it be fire or wind. You could have a monk with the little arrow on your head if you really wanted. This subclass works a little bit differently than the other subclasses in that it's not a whole bunch of new features every time, but it is much more specific but it is much more kind of customizable into how you're going to use the subclass to your advantage depending on your campaign and where you're at. So we're going to go over that right now. At level 3 you get the ability called Disciple of the Elements, and this is your bread and butter for this subclass. In a nutshell, a very oversimplified nutshell, this kind of turns you into an elemental spellcaster. But it's a little more complicated than that, so we're going to break it down. So first off, when you take this feat, you begin to learn elemental disciplines, which are abilities that allow you to spend your ki points to interact with the elements around you. When you first take this subclass, you know two elemental disciplines. The first one is called Elemental Attunement, which everyone gets, you automatically get it, and then the second one is one of your choice, and we'll go over all the options of elemental disciplines a bit later. But then as you level up in this subclass, at levels 6, 11, and 17, you get to pick new elemental disciplines to add to your reserve of abilities. In addition to that, when you get the chance to pick a new elemental discipline, you can also swap out one of your old elemental disciplines if you so choose. Much like a spellcaster being able to swap spells over a long rest or when they level up, the same goes for the Monk of the Way of the Four Elements. Some of these disciplines allow you to cast certain spells at varying strengths. When you do have this option, you aren't spending a spell slot, you're spending ki points, and instead of doing material components, you just get to cast the spell. However, you are still beholden to the rules of that spell in terms of casting time, such as one action, a bonus action, or 10 minutes, however long it takes, and duration of the spell. You're limited to those things still, even if you're not paying the material components or the spell slot cost. The other side note of this is when you hit level 5, you gain the ability to spend extra ki points to cast those spells at higher levels. One example in the book of this is the spell Burning Hands. When you cast it, you can spend an extra ki point to cast that as a 2nd or 3rd or 4th level spell, if that has the option available to it. So now that we understand the basics of elemental disciplines and being a disciple of the elements, which just continues on throughout your life in this subclass, we're going to talk about the elemental disciplines and what they are and what is their effect. First up though, we need to talk about Elemental Attunement. This is the free one that everyone gets right when you become a Four Elements monk. To use your Elemental Attunement, you can use one action and no ki points to cause one of 4 different effects to elements within 30 feet of you. You have the option to create a harmless sensory effect from the element. You can light or snuff out a candle or a torch or a small campfire. You can chill or warm 1 pound of non-living material for 1 hour, or you can cause 1 cubic foot of earth, fire, water, or mist to take some sort of crude shape for a time. It's pretty simplistic kind of things, but that's when you get free early on, and of course you're able to swap these out if you don't see yourself needing that very much. Next up is Breath of Water. It costs you 6 key points to cast and requires you to be level 17, but it allows you to cast the spell Cone of Cold. Then there's Clinch of the North Wind, which costs you 3 key points. You have to be level 6 to acquire this one, and it allows you to cast Hold Person. Eternal Mountain Defense is a level 17 ability. It costs you 5 key points, but you get to cast Stone Skin on yourself. Note, only on yourself. Fangs of the Fire Snake is a special ability with this. You can choose to use either 1 or 2 key points, but how this works is when you make an attack action, you can spend 1 key point, which basically empowers your hands and fists with tendrils of fire that increases your unarmed attack range to 10 feet. So you can reach out and hit someone from a little more distance. The damage from those unarmed attack changes from bludgeoning to fire damage, and if you're able to hit your target with your attack, you're able to spend 1 more key point to deal an additional 1d10 fire damage with that attack. Next is Flame of the Phoenix, which costs 4 key points to cast, requires you to be level 11, and allows you to cast the spell Fireball. Gong of the Summit only costs 3 points to spend, but you have to be level 6, and it allows you to cast the spell Shatter. Mist Stance costs 4 key points to cast. You have to be level 11 to use it, but you get to cast Gaseous Form on yourself. You get to best turn into a mist. Ride the Wind is another level 11 discipline. It costs you 4 key points to cast and allows you to cast Fly on yourself, so allows for greater mobility. River of Hungry Flame costs 5 key points. You have to be level 17 to cast it, and allows you to cast the spell Wall of Fire. An earlier discipline is called Rush of the Gale Spirits. It only costs you 2 key points. You can get it at level 3 when you first start, and it allows you to cast the spell Gust of Wind. Shape of the Flowing River only costs you 1 key point to cast, but it lets you do quite a bit of stuff. You can essentially turn ice into water and water into ice, and there's a long write-up in the book about how this one works with a lot of details. Next up is Sweeping Cinder Strike, which only costs you 2 key points. You can get this at level 3 as well, and it allows you to cast the spell Burning Hands. Water Whip is only 2 key points to cast, but it allows you essentially to whip somebody from 30 feet away. When you cast Water Whip, you summon a 30-foot long tendril of water that attacks someone. They must make a dexterity saving throw, and if they fail, they take 3d10 bludgeoning damage. On top of that, if they fail their dexterity saving throw, they can either be knocked prone or pulled 25 feet closer to you so you can reach out and bring someone up to you. In addition to that, you can spend extra key points on this to deal 1d10 extra damage per key point. And last up is a level 17 discipline called Wave of the Rolling Earth. It costs you 6 key points to cast and allows you to cast the spell Wall of Stone. As you can see, this monk is very thematic. Just going over this and outlining and researching this, I thought of how cool this would be to create a genasi that is a monk focused on their own element, whether it's earth, fire, or water. This could go really well for fire. Or if you want to be the avatar and control all the elements, you have that ability. By level 17, you should know 5 different elemental disciplines, and you can mix and match them how you need, depending on your character's needs. I think this is a really interesting one. It makes it for a lot of fun. A lot of use of the elements and the terrain around you could be really interesting. So I look forward to trying this one out myself. Let me know what you think of the Way of the 4 Elements in the comments below. And as always, I've been Richard. Thanks for watching.